Hi everybody, my name is Nima and welcome back to Anise Feature. Today we're going to be reviewing Netflix's trailer for The Witcher Season 4. This is not a Netflix Witcher channel, this is a Books Witcher channel. However, because the Netflix series is supposed to be an adaptation of the books, I do want to kind of review what they are doing, what they have been doing, and specifically Season 4, because Season 4 is supposed to be an adaptation of Baptism of Fire, which is my favorite book in the Witcher series, so I feel a little bit obligated to review it. And we have a lot to review. So the trailer for Season 4 just dropped a few hours ago, and there have also been a lot of Redanian intelligence articles coming out over the past few weeks, so I thought why not review it, why not talk about some of the things that they're doing, and we'll wrap it up all in this nice little short video of updates. As you might be able to tell, I kind of changed my desk setup here, and I moved my camera so that I can actually stream or record very quick thoughts, so let me know what you think about this new format. But okay, so there are several things that I want to talk about in this video, because I do want to react to the trailer, but there is also this additional context of the leaks and news which has been coming out over the past few weeks. So I'm not going to be reacting to the trailer just as the trailer, I'm also going to be incorporating some of the other news that we've heard of. I think the way that I'm going to structure this video is talking about things from worst to best, because actually I have really mixed opinions about this trailer. Now, let me preface it with this. I'm not expecting The Witcher on Netflix to suddenly become good, to suddenly become either a good TV show that I enjoy watching or to become an book-accurate adaptation. I don't expect either of those things from them. But yeah, let's just start with the bad stuff first to get it out of the way. The worst part of this season, hands down, I don't even have to watch this season yet to know what is going to be the worst part. The worst part of this season, hands down, telling from the trailer, is going to be Yennefer's plotline. And this is not surprising to me at all, because we've known this for like a couple of years now. From the leaks and from the Redanian intelligence news, we've known that Yennefer is going to take like this major role in the politics and shaping the politics of the continent in the Netflix Witcher's version of the story. And that just doesn't happen at all in the books. The exact opposite occurs in the books. So as we can see in this trailer, Yennefer is trying to put together an army to stop Vilgefortz, who is also putting together an army to capture Ciri. Now, there are several things wrong with these statements. Let me start actually on Vilgefortz's side. So actually, I think one of the parts which makes Vilgefortz a very captivating villain in the Witcher books is that he's actually really powerful. He presents a real threat to our heroes, to our protagonists, and the thing is that he didn't really need to put together an army. Really. He's not concerning himself with doing all the little details of his evil plan. He literally has his evil minion Rianse do everything for him, basically up until Tower of the Swallow. Vilgefortz becomes a very distant villain in Baptism of Fire, and even a lot in Tower of the Swallow until the end. So making him up front and center really for me just takes away all of the kind of fear and anticipation of a fight with him that we're supposed to be feeling as the audience. What makes Vilgefortz scary is that he's a really good boss and he knows when to delegate his evil tasks. He didn't put together an army or anything, he delegated all of that to Stefan Skellen and he was like, you put together a Hansa, you put together mercenaries, I'm out, I'm torturing Yennefer, get out of my way. One of the key issues that I have with Netflix, this will be a through line for the rest of this video and all of the Witcher Netflix critique that I have, is that they try to make things very painfully obvious and direct for us as the audience. And the thing is that it's like they don't trust us to understand the plot and understand what it is that they're doing to pick up what they're putting down. The biggest example that I have of this is actually in Season 1, where Geralt is making wishes with the djinn, and instead of trusting the audience to be able to count up until 3, they have to actually mark on his arm every wish that he makes. Like, we can't count for ourselves 1, 2, 3. Every time I watch something from Netflix's Witcher, I just feel like they don't trust me to be an intelligent person and informed audience member. It's like they have to hold my hand through everything. But okay, let's get back to talking about Yennefer. So in the books, Yennefer is not obsessed with power and engaging the other sorcerers in these games of power. Yennefer and Geralt are really paralleled in this regard. They are independent actors. They're not allied with any specific political affiliation. Yes, they have allies, like Geralt helps Maeve, the Queen of Lyria and Rivia, fight against the Nilfgaardians on the Battle of the Bridge. And Yennefer gets aid from Jarl Krok from Skellige. But they're not subservient to these factions, and they're not seeking to gain power for themselves. And Yennefer especially, she doesn't work with anybody as a team like Geralt has to in order to go find Ciri. So this is my problem with Netflix Yennefer. So Yennefer in the Witcher books is a very strong and independent character, and I know that the words strong female character have been overused to hell by now. But the thing is that in this world where everybody doubts women, I'm actually talking about Sapkowski's fictional world, but I guess also in this world where everybody doubts a woman, Yennefer having this level of independence and agency to act by herself as an independent free actor and go on this crazy quest by herself on this suicidal mission is actually impressive and quite definitive for her character. And what also makes this conflict in the books interesting to me is that she is not going up against men who are telling her that she can't do it and to stop, but she's actually going up against other women. It is Philippa Eilhart and her also former best friend Triss Merigold who try to stop her from doing what she's doing. Talk about passing the Bechdel test, right? The thing about the conflict in the Witcher books is that it's actually more complicated than you might think. It's not just Yennefer versus Vilgefortz, it's Yennefer versus Philippa, also versus Vilgefortz, also versus Emhyr var Emrery, also versus the On-El. And then Geralt and his company are just kind of like wandering around and then they get stuck in Beauclair and that's them. So there's multiple factions going on here, and it's not just like, oh, the sorceresses who are good versus the sorcerer who is evil. I feel like taking out Philippa Eilhart as an antagonist makes the entire conflict just very generic and forgettable. Not to mention that I feel like Yennefer rising to the role of a leader and being accepted by everyone as their leader in an army is just like, where did this come from? It feels like the show wants to show that Yennefer is powerful and that she is respected and that she's grown as a character, but the thing is that she already had all of that in the books, but it didn't look like this at all. And what they're doing right now contradicts everything about her book character. Yennefer in the books is literally kidnapped by the Lodge of Sorceresses and is going to be forced to work with them until, well, some frenemy stuff from Fringilla Vigo sets her free. She escapes Philippa's magical spell which she put on the Castle Monte Calvo, and then she escapes and goes to Skellige and finds refuge there, and continues her crazy pursuit of Ciri, which, might I even say, is even more crazy than what Geralt is doing, in terms of suicidal missions to save their daughter. We'll get to what Geralt is doing in a second, but I just have to say that everything related to Yennefer here is probably going to be 100% made up original material, and we've seen how that looks like from The Witcher Netflix. One more thing I have to mention about the politics and the simplifications that they've made to Yennefer is in 2023, when they already had talked about this, and I already talked about this in my Rise and Fall of the Witcher video, long video essay, but this was already known since season 3. Tomasz Baginski literally said it in this interview, which I will read right now. In the books, it's a little bit more politically complex, and we decided to simplify it a little bit and put it all on Yennefer. So Yennefer is the main force behind calling for the conclave. We had to simplify politics behind it because the Tanad coup is very, very complex politically, because at the same time, we have Nilfgaard, Redania, mages, Scoia'tael, and Vilgefortz playing all their games. The thing is that they've been simplifying so much over the course of this entire show that they have no choice but to create even more simplified versions going forth. Which is kind of crazy to me, because isn't the thing about writing that it's supposed to get more complex as time goes on? So yeah, I don't know if I can even really comment on anything else that Yennefer is doing in this show, because it has no book equivalent and it's just pretty much all made up. Okay, now let's talk about Ciri. So Ciri actually doesn't appear in a lot of this trailer. I mean, she does for a few moments, but I found these scenes really cheesy and really cliche. There's this part where it says, "She's not who she says she is," and then the others are like, "None of us are." I can't really go off of just this trailer to talk about it. I'm going to actually reference some other articles that have come out about this, one of which I have the utmost problems with. So the first thing that I want to pick on is that actually a lot of the content that we'll see, if not all of the content that we'll see about Ciri and the rats is actually coming from a discontinued, not in production anymore, spin-off show that Netflix was producing about the rats. Yeah, they were basically going to do a heist story, so kind of like Ocean's 11, but with the rats instead. They were filming this whole thing. They basically canceled that production, and so now they're reusing the footage to create season 4. So that could be both bad and good. The thing is that that spin-off was like entirely original content and had nothing to do with the books. So I feel like we might see more of that. Because it's like, for example, the live-action spin-off Blood Origin was not good. Despite that it had more focus on the characters and on the production as just like one singular storyline, was probably like the worst thing that Netflix Witcher has put out. And because that spinoff was also about like quirky bunch of fantasy characters getting together and doing a thing, I feel like the Rats storyline here is just going to be more of the same. Maybe that is an unfair judgment, but I mean, that's what we've seen from their character dynamic writing so far. The optimist in me wants to say, well, maybe they're going to be able to put more emphasis on these characters and more focus on them because they had done all this spin-off work where they were only focusing on these characters. But the thing is, with the precedence of other parts that they've done, I don't think that's the case. And now let's talk about the other thing that is more of an issue for me. So I actually have the article here. This was published by Redania Intelligence a couple of days ago. And it is about adapting a certain scene from Time of Contempt with Ciri and the Rats. Trigger warning, this scene is about sexual assault and rape, so skip to this part of the video if you don't want to hear discussion of that topic. So in the books, after Ciri joins the rats, after they rescue her from the trappers, she is assaulted by one of the rats, Kaylee, and then another, Missile. And then she forms a romantic relationship with Missile. The whole point of this scene and subversion of the trope that Sapkowski was doing is that Missile, you think, is there to save her because, like, she's a girl's girl, and then she's not. Ciri is 14 during this interaction. The rest of the rats are ranging from about 18 to late 20s to, I actually have no idea how old Iskra is because she's an elf, but she's also a teenager, so she might be like half a century old, we just don't know. They are all youth, however, they do have an age gap from how young Ciri is to how old, say, Giselher is. I feel like people forget about this a lot when we talk about Ciri and Missile because they just see like, oh, two young girls. But like Ciri is 14 and Missile is 18, 19, or possibly in her 20s. So yeah, this is a much larger topic and I'm actually working on a video right now about Ciri and Missile and kind of what I think was the intention, was Sapkowski's intention behind it all, and a bit more context surrounding the whole thing. But yeah, anyways. But the problem that I have with Netflix here is actually kind of serious. Because I feel like they're really going to downplay it and reframe this assault in a context where it's more like representation rather than the assault that it is. Why do I think this? Well, the first part is that Netflix has not been sensitive about these topics beforehand, and has really had a lot of problematic elements to it. I love how people say that Sapkowski's writing is misogynistic and takes advantage of female characters, when literally in this show run by a female showrunner, Lauren Hissrich, in the first season, in the second episode, the way that we're introduced to Yennefer's character is in a rape scene that didn't exist in the books. They just added that shit in for spectacle. So I feel like Netflix's inability to treat these topics with sensitivity is going to be its downfall. And the other thing is that it's not just my conjecture. This is what Missile's actress had to say about the character. You know, the character who sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl. Missile is this amazing, complex young woman who chooses her path despite the odds against her. For example, in the challenges she faces, still choosing to love and form relationships in a world that's been so cruel to her. She never chooses to give up. This is one of the things that connected me most to her. I had to totally empathize with all of Missile's more questionable choices, but when it all clicked, it taught me how much empathy I'm really capable of. Empathy in the place of judgment is maybe the most helpful tool an actor can have, in my opinion. Now, this is all just PR talk, but like, what the fuck? Missile choosing to love and form relationships. Well, that's certainly one way to put it. I know that a lot of people find Ciri and Missel, as they are depicted in the Witcher books, to be like kind of an offensive depiction or potentially even a lesbophobic depiction. But the thing is that they weren't created to be positive representation. At the same time, I don't believe that they were created to be lesbophobic or to have an anti-lesbian message. The whole message about the rats is that hurt people, and that trauma survivors don't act in perfect ways. The thing that The Witcher taught me is that being a trauma survivor doesn't make you a good person. Now, I know that may seem like a shocker to a lot of people, but it is actually true. We're all equal in our morals. Having survived something horrific doesn't make you morally better than anybody else. And this was a hard lesson for me to swallow as a teenager. So that's why I don't feel that there's any lesbophobic message behind Ciri and Missel in the books. I feel like they're just part of this wider world of The Witcher, of this complex tapestry that Sapkowski weaves, where it's just like, tell an interesting story. Create interesting characters. It's not an endorsement of anything. It's not representation of anything. It just is. And I understand why that may seem politically incorrect or like bad representation for lesbians, but I mean, like, it comes back down to trusting that the audience has good intentions and is intelligent enough to understand your meaning. I feel like Sapkowski writes with more respect to the reader for their intelligence, whereas Netflix is just like, well, if we represent like a lesbian being evil, then that means we must think that all lesbians are evil. And it's just like, don't freak out, just write an interesting character. You don't have to make them good just because they're lesbians. You can write about lesbians that do fucked up things. Like, I allow it. I'll give you my card. That's my concern for the Ciri plotline. It is actually kind of concerning because I am kind of afraid that people will start, like, shipping Ciri and Missel and being like, yay, like, positive Yuri moment. Please do not do that. Please read Time of Contempt. Do not do that. And yeah, this topic is really complex, and that's why I'm making another video on it. Okay, we're done talking about Ciri. Let's talk about Geralt. So Geralt's company are my favorite characters ever. We even have the art on the wall to prove it. Also Sapkowski being knighted in ParCon in 2000. I have very high standards for the adaptation of anything having to do with Geralt's Hansa. Which, okay, semantics, very quickly. Geralt's company does not become a Hansa until chapter 5 of Tower of the Swallow, where Angoulême introduces this concept of an Hanse, a Hansa, to them, and then they adopt the term and Geralt calls them a Hansa for the first time. So before Tower of the Swallow, before Angoulême joins them in September, right before the equinox, they are not a Hansa, okay? They are a company, but not a Hansa. We don't even learn the term Hansa until Tower of the Swallow. So that's my little mini rant. But yes, okay, so Geralt's company minus Angoulême, because I don't believe that they're actually adapting Angoulême. I think that she escaped this by virtue of being a minor character. So, like, yes, free my girl. She didn't deserve to be adapted by this shit. So the largest narrative change that they're making to Geralt's company that I really think will weaken the writing is that they are going to put all of the backstory for the characters back to back to back. Instead of the fish soup being a scene where they connect just generally, they are having them sit down in a circle and one by one sharing their traumatic backstories. Now, I shouldn't have to explain why this doesn't really make sense realistically, because if you meet someone in real life, you're not just going to sit down with them like 2 hours later and start telling them about all of the bad things that happened in your childhood. I guess some people do that, but it's really socially inappropriate and you probably shouldn't do that. The other issue that I have with this is structural, because it seems very boring to me to have each backstory going one by one, because that's the thing about Geralt's company, about Regis, Milva, and Cahir, is that their backstories are staggered throughout the book and even into Tower of the Swallow and Lady of the Lake. And I think that Sapkowski did this intentionally as a writer because it creates suspense and it makes the reader want to keep reading because it's full of mystery. Like, we don't really know who exactly these characters are, and we're incentivized to pay attention to them and to really watch their development and wait for the reveal. I mean, for example, Regis as a character is introduced in chapter 3, but he's not revealed until chapter 5, and then his backstory isn't even explained until chapter 7, which is the last chapter of the book. Similarly, although Milva is introduced with her backstory in chapter 1 of Baptism of Fire, we don't find out about the secrets that she's been keeping. I'm not going to explain what those are because I want to to avoid spoilers in this video, but we don't find out about that secret until the very end of the book in chapter 7 because it's a secret that she can no longer physically hold on to. And Cahir, of course, is just the biggest mystery of them all, as Dandelion says in Tower of the Swallow. I also feel like this is somewhat of a tone-deaf decision to make because Milva and Regis both have like very serious and somewhat disturbing backstories that they're heavy topics, aren't they, right? And then like they're going to get this, guys, they're going to have Jaskir's story be a mini musical segment. So I'm just imagining it being like Regis talking about his backstory, like, despair and grief, as you know, are perfect excuses. Everyone thinks they understand. Even I thought I understood, but I was merely applying theory to practice. And then Dandelion is just like, yep, I studied all 7 liberal arts and graduated summa cum laude. Like, oh my god, that is going to be a very tough act to follow. And I haven't even mentioned yet the issues with what Netflix is actually changing their backstories to be. So I mentioned Jaskier is getting a mini musical. Regis's backstory is going to be animated, apparently in the style of The Witcher 3 cinematic intros, so we'll see how that turns out, I guess. But they are actually really ravaging Cahir's backstory with this. Get this, guys. This is an article from Adonian Intelligence. In the 5th episode of The Witcher Season 4, centered around the fish soup, characters of Geralt's Hansa will each have their own flashbacks and backstories told. That brings us to Cahir and his personal relationship with Emperor Emir. Haven't we learned to keep Emir away from children? This is apparently Cahir's backstory. It is revealed that as a child, Cahir used to run away from home, from his bad father. Stop with the Killock slander, okay? Because he was actually a good father. He actually pleaded with Emperor Emir to save Cahir when Emir was like, no, I want that motherfucker dead. So I don't get why they're just making him like a bad dad, but okay, back to the article. Cahir used to run away from home from his bad father and care for this weird creature that looks like a hedgehog who is ostracized and lives in a cave. Cahir brings him food, water, etc. That creature is, of course, Duny, aka Emir. As Cahir tells this to the Hansa, that is also where Geralt puts 2 and 2 together. Duny equals Emir. So, like, this is offensive for 2 reasons. First of all, Cahir's backstory in the books, which is revealed only in Lady of the Lake chapter 9, really, says so much. Like, it is actually quite deep, in my opinion, because it's about imperialism, it's about nationalism, it's about grooming child soldiers. It talks about how war takes away humanity. That's what Cahir's story is about. Instead, they're just relating him to Emir as sort of like Emir's babysitter, and also just like, I know that they've already really destroyed Cahir's character in this series, but like, do you have to do it more? And another issue that I have with this is that it's also making Geralt look like an idiot. Which, okay, the show has already done that in various other regards, so it's nothing new. But in the books, Geralt found this out by researching by himself. Well, not by himself, but with Fringilla Vigo in the library. Yes, they did other things in that Beauclair library other than, you know what. He researched Ciri's bloodline on the tip that Avallac'h gave him and found out her lineage through his own research. Because he's smart, because he's intelligent, because he knows how to do his own research and cite his sources. And I also feel like having to spell it out for the reader is, again, an insult to our intelligence as well. So those are the changes that they're making to Cahir's backstory. They're also moving up Milva's backstory because she doesn't actually tell us everything about her family until Tower of the Swallow chapter 3. The issue that I have with that is the same issue that I have with how Yennefer was treated in the first season of this show. Because instead of allowing her to just be a strong and interesting character on her own when we meet her, they have to immediately introduce her sad backstory, the tune played on the smallest violin, for us to pity her instead of just be impressed and excited by her. It's giving Wattpad fanfiction. I feel like the Netflix Witcher show has this pathological need for us to love the good characters, the heroes, as soon as they appear on screen. We're not allowed to form our own opinions about them and see their characters unfold and become more complex over time. We just have to know everything about them right at the second they're introduced. And this does a real disservice to their characters because part of the fun of the characters is watching them reveal things about themselves and becoming more interesting as time goes on. But again, I feel like Netflix doesn't trust its audience to keep itself engaged and to keep paying attention to the show and keep watching. Maybe because they doubt their audience's attention span, maybe because they doubt the intrigue of their own writing, but they just have this need to throw everything at the audience at once. And it makes it more boring. Like, if you want me to feel pity for Yennefer of Vengerberg, you have done something exceptionally wrong. And I really hope that Milva isn't going to get this same kind of treatment, because it just made Yennefer's story like a huge slog to get through instead of a character that I was actually invested in. Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about here is Geralt and Regis. Now, I have qualms with the dialogue a little bit, and I'll get to that, but let me just say, heartbreaking, the worst person you know just made a great point. What do you mean that the Netflix show actually allowed Geralt and Regis to have a somewhat emotional and intimate conversation? I don't think I can actually play the scene without getting copyrighted, so this is the dialogue. You'd abandon a life of peace to join me on a death march until the day you die. So I'm not saying the dialogue is good per se, because like Netflix, characteristically, it's very overdramatic and also pretty oversimplified. But it's also funny to imagine that just by the virtue of Regis having to exist as a character at all, they were unable to rid of the dialogue entirely, because a part of Regis is dialogue and he doesn't exist as a character anywhere else. So they had to have him and Geralt talk and say nice words to each other. Geralt and Regis were not at this stage in their relationship in Baptism of Fire. Regis in Baptism of Fire is a big nuisance, and that's why I love him. Regis takes the responsibility of being a big annoyance to Geralt in Baptism of Fire. That's not to say that he doesn't give him helpful advice, that he doesn't save his and everyone else's lives, but he is there to challenge him as a character. Regis was not pledging to join him until the day he dies, because he just met him 3 days ago. Regis joins the company because his house and shop in Dillingen has basically been destroyed because of the ongoing war with Nilfgaard. You know, people conceive of Regis as like this all-powerful vampire, and like, he is a very powerful vampire, but he's also just a guy. He's been living as a human for years now. He has a home. Well, he had a home. He has his job, his keep, what he does for a living. He has a life. You know, he has his own motivations other than just like, I'm here to be a really cool vampire, which, you know, he does sometimes, but not, you know. The other issue that I have here is phrasing it as Regis abandoning a life of peace to join Geralt on a death march. Regis joining Geralt wasn't him giving up peace. It wasn't him becoming violent. I would actually argue that Regis does not abandon a life of peace by joining Geralt. Instead, he actually accesses a larger peace, an ability to do more good in the world by helping Geralt and his company, by becoming a part of them, by becoming more human. And there's one more reason why I don't like this piece of dialogue, and maybe this is just me nitpicking, but let me talk about some of the other things in context which Netflix is doing to Baptism of Fire and the changes that I think they might make. So maybe unexpectedly, I'm going to talk a lot about Regis right now, and I'm trying to actually make another video about him, so I'll post that as the next video to this once I have it up. But okay. So here's the thing. I don't know if they're going to keep the Regis metaphors that the book set up. And this is profoundly aggravating to me in a variety of ways. So this is more conjecture right now because we don't know what Netflix is doing. We'll find out on October 30th, I suppose. So the phrase, a life of peace. Right. So this phrasing makes me think that Regis's character in Netflix is more concerned with peace rather than sobriety. If you don't know, in the Witcher books, vampires drink blood not to feed, but as alcohol or as an addictive, fun substance, and they can become addicted to it. So this is what happened with Regis. He developed a debilitating addiction, and then he died. Yes, The Witcher is very realistic. I'm telling you, this series is basically just here to mimic real life. But this is my issue with it, because earlier this month, they also released another teaser trailer, which was Geralt and his company fighting a wraith in an unknown location. I realized, like, way too late that this wraith is probably supposed to be in Fen Karn, which is the elven cemetery that they find Regis in. And okay, I have problems with that. So the whole thing about Fen Karn, the joke about it was that there are no monsters in Fen Karn. It's devoid of monsters. At the same time, they find a vampire in it, who is not a monster but a human, because that's who Regis is. As Zoltan and Geralt are taking the refugee women and children to trying to find a safe location away from the Nilfgaardian invasion, Zoltan leads them to Fen Karn, which is an abandoned elven cemetery. The thing is that it's been abandoned for over 500 years, but despite that, they get there and it's a pretty spooky cemetery that's full of fog and mist, and it's just really creepy. So they think, oh man, there must be monsters here, there must be ghouls here. And then they all get paranoid and a bit scared, and the scene is quite comical. But Zoltan and Percival and Milva and Geralt are all like on high alert trying to look for a ghoul. The joke is that they don't find a ghoul, they find Regis, who is a vampire, but we don't know that yet, and who also is not doing anything vampiric or vampirish in any way. He literally hides from them because he's scared of them. Some people might think that he's lying. I'm choosing to take him at his word for that. He hides from them because he was simply afraid of them, as are the times. So the point of them meeting in Fen Karn and them going to Fen Karn at all in the first place is that it's mismatched expectations, that they thought that they were going to be in danger from ghouls and other monsters in the cemetery, and actually who they met was a very friendly man who ends up joining their quest. Then when he's revealed to be a vampire, it's a bit ironic, but anyways. So if they add in a wraith to Fen Karn and actually show, yeah, there's monsters here, it's really dangerous, that defeats the whole purpose of what Fen Karn was supposed to be. It was supposed to be this comedic scene and this interaction where it's like, whoops, JK, there's not actually anything scary in here. Instead, just being like, yep, there's monsters. You need to kill them because you're a witcher. Also, this whole episode in Geralt's journey is that he's stopped being a witcher and he's stopped killing monsters. And this is one of the reasons why Regis joins him. Okay, so let's continue. So when they meet him, he's picking mandrake because he distills the mandrake into an alcoholic beverage. And when he offers this alcoholic beverage to the rest of the company, and he's like, hey guys, I'm probably not going to be able to go back to Dillingen because the war's on. So do you want some of my goods? Like, I'm not going to be able to sell it anyways. Enjoy. Everyone starts drinking the mandrake distillate. It's a great time. Dandelion is having a sip, and Geralt tells him, give it to our host, the Witcher said, bowing slightly towards Emiel Regis. Where are your manners, Dandelion? And Regis, in this awesome act of foreshadowing and establishing his character, replies, please forgive me, gentlemen, the alchemist said, acknowledging the gesture, but I never permit myself any stimulants. My health isn't what it was. I've been forced to give up many pleasures. Not even a sip? It's a principle, Regis explained calmly. I never break any principles once I've adopted them. So Regis brewing the distillate and giving them the distillate and denying drinking the distillate himself, denying drinking an alcoholic beverage, is very integral to his character. Not just symbolically, not just that he refuses to drink, but also later on in the book. When Milva and Dandelion have realized that Regis is a powerful vampire and this fact has kind of sunk in, they go to Geralt and they're kind of afraid and they're like, should we be afraid of him? And Geralt is like, well, he's our friend, so no. But if he wasn't our friend, yeah. But they have this discussion, and Geralt literally points out to them all of the events of Chapter 3 when they first met and when Regis gave them the mandrake distillate. This is the interaction between Dandelion and Geralt. Regis is a vampire. It's no secret what vampires feed on. What will happen when he gets seriously hungry? Yes, we saw him eating fish soup, and since then he's been eating and drinking with us as normal as anyone. But will he be able to control his craving? Geralt, do I have to spell it out to you? He controlled his bloodlust when gore was pouring from your head. He didn't even lick his fingers after he'd finished applying the dressing. And during the full moon, when we'd been drinking mandrake moonshine and were sleeping in his shack, he had the perfect opportunity to get his hands on us. Have you checked for puncture marks on your swan-like neck? So the whole point that Regis hosting them in his cottage during the full moon and giving them the mandrake distillate showed his humanity. This is something else that I'll talk about in my Regis essay, but hosting and being a gracious host is very symbolically tied to humanity in literature. It's a very cultural thing, and what I'm actually going to be referencing is the Odyssey, so that's just how far back it goes. But that's the point, because Regis takes care of them as a person would. By taking out the mandrake distillate, that removes all of the point of his character, all of the establishment of his character in the first place. And the other issue that I have with this, this is more just speculation because, again, I don't know what Netflix is doing to his character, but the line, "a life of peace," makes me think that they are going to make Regis's principle and vow to be more aligned with protecting humanity or being human or non-violence and not killing anybody or not biting anybody just because, like, the principle of peace, rather than the principle of not drinking, of sobriety. And, like, that really bothers me. Because the whole thing, what I actually think makes Regis and the vampires in The Witcher unique is that it's not just that he's vowed to be peaceful and to live besides humans. That has been done with, like, a lot of vampires in fiction, and it's not unique. It's pretty generic as far as a vampire story goes. Vampire that vows not to bite people is like, that's been done before. Vampires drinking blood as an analogy for alcohol, and the whole metaphor that Regis has with alcoholism is 100% a unique invention by Sapkowski. He said this in an interview near 2000, and, like, it's quite realistic, and it combines dark humor, and for that matter, it's really significant and important to the identity of the Witcher books. Because the Witcher books are all about interacting with real life and showing situations that are a lot like real life. So this comes back to how Netflix will represent Regis's backstory. If they represent his backstory as just like, oh yeah, well, there is this vampire and then he bit a lot of people and then now he doesn't bite people, that oversimplification will really upset me. Because it's not just about peacefulness, it's not just about not attacking people, it's about personal growth. Regis's sobriety wasn't just for humans, it was for himself. I think that that's the one thing that I'm really going to be worried about as season 4 approaches, because, like, Regis's backstory is really important, and Regis is my favorite character, or one of my favorite characters, so I'm gonna be watching this like a hawk. So that's my thoughts on The Witcher Netflix news that has come out recently. I hope this video wasn't too complainy or ranty, but I did want to get something out just talking about all these updates that have come out, because a lot of updates have come out over the past week, and I wanted to put it on the channel as some just kind of like, we gotta talk about it at some point, right? Also, I do feel like, this is a books channel. I'm not trying to platform Netflix or give it more attention than it needs to have, but I also feel like a lot of people who are trying to find out what the difference is between Netflix and the books, it can actually be helped by talking about it from a books perspective and talking about what matters to me as a books fan. So there will be a little bit more Netflix related content coming out on this channel as season 4 comes out, as I have reactions to it. I do think that I want to try streaming my reaction to The Witcher Netflix season 4, and I might try a few test streams in the next couple of weeks, but we'll see about that. I am working on my Baptism of Fire essays, and I'm trying to get them out by October 30th, so y'all will have something else to watch other than Netflix. And I also kind of want to try more extemporaneous commentary and essays, maybe like this video. So again, let me know how you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.